One of the most frustrating things to see when I watch soccer and basketball games is the disconnect between the feedback and the frustration of a coach during the game and the practice activities during practice. So, based on conversations with players or watching some of the practice or talking to the coaches to find out what actually occurs during the practice, oftentimes they will practice skills without any decision making element. So, soccer players are passing the ball back and forth, on a stationary line, or maybe they're doing a wall pass into shooting, but there's no defensive player there except for maybe the goalie. Basketball doing the same type of things, three-man weaves or stationary passing, or just passing the ball around while the defense is working on shell defense with the explicit instruction that the defense is not allowed to steal the pass, so there's no real consequence to throwing bad passes. And then you get in a game, and all you hear is the coach criticizing players for turnovers or complaining about the decisions that they make, complaining about passes that are poorly timed or don't have the right weight on the pass, especially in soccer, or maybe a basketball pass where you lead the player too much and don't, adjust for the speed of movement of your teammate. And so the coaches are constantly criticizing and growing visibly frustrated about based on these mistakes. But these mistakes that are occurring in the games are not skills that are actually practiced during practice. So essentially we're getting frustrated at players for doing a skill that we don't practice. That because we don't practice it is probably beyond their current skill level. So we're basically just getting frustrated at players because they're not good enough, and really we're getting frustrated at the players for not being good enough because we're not doing anything to prepare them for those situations. We think that doing a three-man weave drill is a passing drill, and so when there's a turnover committed on a pass, well, it's the player's fault because I worked on passing during my practice. But really the constraints of that three-man weave have nothing to do with what causes the turnover in a game. And as long as there's that disconnect between what's going on in practice and what's going on in the games and the mistakes that are made in the games, and then there's the disconnect between the coach's feelings of frustrations because the players aren't getting it or aren't doing what they did in practice, and the players feeling like, well, we don't ever practice against defense, so of course I made a mistake. This is the real breakdown in terms of practice design, coach-player communication, and ultimately skill and player development. If we want players to make good decisions in games, we need to practice decision-making in practice. If we want players to be good passers during games, we need players to practice passing under the same type of constraints that they're going to face during the game. That is, teammates who are on the move, teammates who are defended, help defense, in a confined space potentially, and things of this nature. And when we ignore these constraints in practice, then we set up players to fail in the games. And when we grow overly frustrated at these mistakes that happen in the games, it tends to reflect poorly on the players because people see the consternation of the coach. They see the player making the mistake, and so they blame the player. But in reality, the mistake should be directed, or the consternation should be directed towards the coach, because the coach is not preparing the players for those situations. Simply doing three-man weave drills and thinking that it's, you've done all you need to do to practice passing, when those have very few of the constraints that are going to be there during a game, the players aren't properly prepared, and there's a lack of teaching in terms of, how to use the available space, how to react to a defensive player, how to read a help defensive player, how to read the defender defending a teammate, so on and so forth. These are the important factors involved in passing during the game and involved in decision making during the game. And when those aren't present during practice, the players aren't prepared fully for the game environment. And that's not the player's fault, that's the coach's fault, and that's the drill design fault. And so we need to spend more time designing drills that take into account more of the constraints that are there during games, and especially those that cause the mistakes, or that cause the most mistakes during games, and spend more time in practice focusing on these things so that we can improve passing and we can improve decision making and we can alleviate the coach's frustrations when these mistakes are made during games.